As I went through the case, I realised there'd been these misunderstandings, missed opportunities, evidence that hadn't been properly considered, witnesses who hadn't been contacted.
Would you say the police failed Lynn Dawson?
Yes, they did.
Real Crime Profile is brought to you by many wonderful sponsors such as ZipRecruiter, Madison Reed Hair Color, Quip Toothbrush, and Man Crates. We are so thankful to have their support and so happy whenever they have a special offer just for our Real Crime Profile listeners. So please, when you hear one of these special opportunities to try a new fantastic service or product, do go over and check them out. We can't do our show without you, and we certainly cannot do it without the companies who make our show possible. You can find the most recent sponsor offer in our show notes, on our Facebook page, and on our website, realcrimeprofile.com. Thanks so much, and thanks for listening to Real Crime Profile.
How was it growing up in that house with your father and your stepmother, Joanne Curtis?
Cold and icy when Joanne was around. Sit up straight, legs together, don't move, don't breathe. That was pretty much it.
Did your dad and Joanne ever share stories about your mother?
No, not that I remember.
So it was like the day she left, she ceased to exist.
That's how it seems to me, yeah.
Hello and welcome to Real Crime Profile. This is Jim Clemente, retired FBI profiler, former New York City prosecutor, and writer-producer on CBS's Criminal Minds. And with me today via Zoom is...
Laura Richards, former criminal behavioural analyst, New Scotland Yard, and founder of Paladin National Stalking Advocacy Service.
And
I am Lisa Zambetti, casting director for CBS's Criminal Minds. And when last we left off, Laura was just taking us through a very granular timeline of Lynn Dawson's last few days before her quote-unquote disappearance. And one thing that struck me when you were going through that, we left off with the infamous call that Chris Dawson gets at the baths that is supposedly from Lynn saying that she's going away. You know, when Chris went away, he took his clothes, his car, his money, his girlfriend. I'm sure that if you had to track his movements, you could. If you had to prove that he really was on this trip, you could, because he probably had to stop and get gas, and then they landed somewhere, and then they turned around and took toll roads and stuff. So, why is it that his wife goes away with the shorts on her back, basically, with nothing? She has no luggage. She's got nothing, as Laura has gone into many, many times. So what is the likelihood of this?
it really looks like that's a lie. That's what it looks like. There's no corroboration at all. There's no evidence that she moved anywhere, that she ever left that house. And so we're left with the very strong circumstantial case that she never left that house. And the only other person involved was Chris Dawson, and he lied about it. So much so that 8 months later, he, for some reason, filled
8 months later, let's just think about that. 8 months later, and he reported her missing 6 weeks later.
Right. So
Joanne Curtis 2 days later.
Right. So 2 days after Lynn goes missing, he moves Joanne back into his house, into his bed, sleeping where Lynn had just slept 2 nights before. And then Joanne starts wearing her clothing and her jewelry and taking over as the mom to her 2 children. And it's just outrageous. Somebody who is actually fretting or worrying or concerned at all about his wife being missing does not do that kind of behavior. This is the behavior of somebody who planned this out, who was not in any way concerned about Lynn coming back, but knew that Lynn would never return to this home.
And why were her wedding rings left? I find that a very bizarre point. For a devoted mother and wife, most that I know rarely take their wedding rings off. And she just struck me as someone. I asked Headley the question, did people say she always wore her wedding rings? Well, I can imagine that she did, given that all her friends knew what they looked like. So why was she not wearing them? That just struck me as very bizarre.
Maybe Chris, who we all know is very frugal, maybe Chris did not want to throw them away. Maybe Chris took them off.
No, certainly this poor woman had every reason in the world to take a break and leave this situation she was in. But then why not go to be with her parents, her sister, her brother? I mean, she had plenty of people around her that if she wanted to get away for a while, she could have. And we would never have lost track of her.
Right. Well, I think the letter that Chris writes 8 months later actually gives us some clues. So let's go into that. First of all, as you mentioned in an earlier episode, Laura, it's titled Antecedent Report, which is the official title of a follow-up report in police jargon there in Australia. So why is it labeled that? Well, he claims at the end of this letter that he was given advice by a very prominent sergeant in the police department, and so perhaps he was. Perhaps it's just a name dropping to give it credibility. I don't know. But labeling like this clearly puts it in the police perspective. So I think what's important is right from the start, there is the statement. It says possible contacts, underlined. It says all girlfriends have been contacted, no success. What I want to point out here is that there's no personal pronoun. It's passive. Have been contacted. He doesn't say, I contacted all her girlfriends. It says all girlfriends have been contacted. No success. Well, none of her actual girlfriends have reported that he contacted them and asked whether she was there. None of them. So that's totally uncorroborated. When you go through the rest of the body of this, you'll see many times where he said, I rung the women's refugees. I rang this person. I knew that. He uses the personal pronoun I. He's buying into it. But this one, he doesn't buy into it. And we know from the interviews that were later done with all her real girlfriends that he did not reach out to them. So this is the first of many successive, what looks like lies in this document. The next one that I think is also completely lacks corroboration is that Lynn was contemplating going to, and it looks like it's HA or NA, to work for him being a doctor that she liked. And again, there was no corroboration of that. The doctor didn't say that she was going to come up and work for him. Lynn never said that to any of her friends or family members. And again, this is just very convenient. It helps to throw an investigative bone to law enforcement in a different direction, away from the home. And I think that's a really important thing. So both those things, girlfriends that she could possibly be with and this doctor that she could possibly be working for, are outside of the homestead. He does not want somebody to come in and look for her there.
Yeah, well, I think the all girlfriends, we heard very clearly from Anna that she had never been contacted, and that's completely inaccurate. From Barbara at the childcare centre, there was a pay packet there waiting for Lynn that he didn't pick up, which again is very bizarre behaviour, that you would still go and do those things. But the distance that he creates, I think, is significant, both in his writing and also the fact that he doesn't make contact, and also with Robin Warren as well. She asked him if he had reported it to police. She actually contacted him, and he said that he hadn't. And again, she thought that was a very strange thing. Mm-hmm. You know, the fact that it took 6 weeks and it was people prompting him to call the police. I think in a lot of this, and I know we're going to go through it beat by beat, it's the absence of things that are
right.
Yeah,
exactly.
In my uneducated opinion, just saying all girlfriends, like, how does he know that? I mean, why not list all of the name? I mean, that
right.
just seems so incredibly vague. I could never say that I knew all of Paul's friends. I mean, it would take me a long time to remember everybody, and it would come to me a little at a time, you know.
Right. And then he says the next bullet is work colleagues. And he mentioned some place in the center, and he says no success. Again, no personal pronoun, right? He doesn't say I contacted them. He just says work colleagues. And then he has a category, possibilities not tried, previous employers, and this Dr. Peter B., that basically these are people that she may have gone to or been with or whatever. Again, it's simply just these possibilities he's throwing out to try to push the investigation, if there is one, away from that home. Now, in the next paragraph, he says, I have rung women's refugees and the Salvation Army and all possible family connections have not received word from her. It's passive, have not received. All right. he says, I have rung Women's Refugees and Salvation Army, but then, and all possible family connections have not received. He doesn't say, and I called all her possible family connections. He doesn't say that. And so when we're looking at that, why does he drop it? Because again, that's an indicator that he's not owning that information. And maybe he thinks, well, there's so many calls to the Women Refugee Center and the Salvation Army that they'll never be able to prove that I didn't call there. But when he gets to the family members, he's not saying, because then he can be called out on it. He's not saying I called the family members, because he knows they're very accessible and they would know whether or not Chris called them.
And it's
So
very interesting. They're buried further down in the police statement. You would expect family to be top,
of
when
course.
talking about, family, friends, the people, concentric circles that we have around us. But he puts women's refuges above that, which is
right. And he does it under the category of possibilities not tried, not possible contacts. Why didn't he put it up there in the possible contacts place? Because he's claiming that they've all been talked to and there's no success. Nobody heard from her. He then goes on to say, I placed an ad in the Telegraph that appeared on this date, our wedding anniversary, and it says it appeared a day late. So he's saying that 3 months after she goes missing, almost 4 months after she goes missing, that he placed an ad in the paper. An ad in the paper. For what? What do you mean?
Amazing.
So I'm placing an ad in the paper. Why? Because it's a public thing. He knows nothing's going to happen from it, but it's something that he could claim he did. Now, I assume that since he said I placed an ad, that he actually did that. And so where is that ad? Did he save it? Did anybody see it? Can we go back in the Telegraph's records and find out if it actually had happened?
It does exist. I have seen it.
Okay.
And it was very brief, saying...
What did it say?
Saying, it's 2 or 3 sentences long of, we miss you, we love you, please contact me.
And it's sandwiched between 2 other gigantic ads of other people looking for other people. So it kind of stands out.
Yeah, as minimal. Yeah.
But it's so random. Why that as a priority, over and above talking to all the people that knew her and going out talking to people, physically going to meet with them, tracking people down, calling up all the family members. It really does smack of showing, look, this is what I'm doing, this is the action I'm taking, that he will hold up and he will cling to. But all the other, much more likely to yield a result, possibilities are much more suitably vague, including the religious organisation, which is something that assumes more prominence, despite the fact that we learned through Lynn's victimology that she was not religious at all. So why would that even feature if she wasn't religious? The same as women's refuges. Why would that feature? Why would he call them over and above anybody else?
I don't know, but I think this next sentence is just really, it just says so much. I rang something staffing, and I was informed a Sister L. Sims worked in casualty. I drove through and spoke to a doctor. I drove through. Interesting. Not I went and spoke there. I drove through. That's weird, but maybe that's how they say it there. And then here's what's important. I knew, he informed me that the Sister Sims didn't fit my wife's description. Okay, a couple things there. This is just really crazy. I knew, he informed me that the Sister Sims didn't fit my wife's description. So supposedly, maybe somebody said Sister Sims might be your wife and she's hiding incognito there. But I knew. He informed me. I knew, he informed me. What is he saying? I mean, he's basically, I think this is leakage. He already knew that she wasn't Lynn, and he leaks it out here. But then he says, didn't fit my wife's description. When somebody has the opportunity to use someone's first name and instead uses a description, that is a distancing. You've seen that in other cases, haven't we, Laura? It's a distancing of the person from the subject that he's talking about. Why didn't he say Lynn? Why did he avoid that? Why didn't he use her name instead of saying my wife? It's possessive, it's controlling, and it is not personal. It says that there's no connection here to me when I look at this.
Hey, lovely RCP listeners. How many of you have stuck to your New Year's intentions or resolutions? We all know starting a healthy routine and sticking to it are two very different things. So I recommend setting yourself up for success. And when it comes to your oral hygiene, there's no better electric toothbrush than Quip. It has a built-in 2-minute timer pulses every 30 seconds to remind you when to switch sides and help you to clean your whole mouth evenly. Well, why do we need that? Well, up to 90% of us don't brush for a full 2 minutes or don't clean evenly. And then there's the brush heads, which are automatically delivered on a dentist-recommended schedule every 3 months for just $5. A little friendly reminder when it's time for a refresh and to stay committed to your oral health, because 75% of us use old, worn-out bristles that are ineffective, and that's why I love Quip, and why over 1 million happy, healthy mouths do too. Quip starts at just $25, and if you go to getquip.com/realcrime right now, you can get your first refill pack for free. That's your first refill pack for free at getquip.com/realcrime.
And I said, well, you could easily get rid of me, like you did Lynn type thing. Perhaps implying that Lynn was gotten rid of, but which of course I didn't know. And that's when he was, just sort of stood stock still and said, don't say things like that. Which is something I hadn't seen before. And then I went, oh,
was that unusual to you?
Yeah.
Did it frighten you?
Yeah.
The next important thing to me was the sentence where he said, there was a slight possibility of contact with a religious organization. Okay, this would later be expounded upon by him, saying that there was a man building I think they said a cubby house. I think it looks like maybe it's a dollhouse or a playhouse for the kids, and that he may have been talking to Lynn about a religious organization. Now, he later calls it a cult. He refers to it as something like that, but he's talking about Seventh-day Adventists and Jehovah's Witnesses. He's not talking about a religious organization that is known to kidnap people or to keep them away from their families or to prevent people from contacting families. In fact, they go out into the public all the time. They proselytize. They talk about their religion. That's core part of their religion. And if that were the case, and she went to one of these religions, she would be out there doing this because it is part and parcel of being involved in that religious group.
And they usually want your money, and she doesn't have any money, or she doesn't take any. Are they going to support her completely? Feed her, clothe her, shelter her?
She's not doing anything with her nursing license, so she's not doing the one profession that she could actually get paid a lot for. And she brought no money with her, and she brought no clothes with her, and she brought no luggage or shoes or a dress. Anything that she could wear to work. There's just nothing. There's no indication at all that she is alive from that day forward. The last time we know she was alive and groggy was the night that her mother called her, the night that she was last known to be alive, January 9th, 1982.
And we know she wasn't religious at all, but I think it's interesting the next sentence that he says about her mother, Mrs. Helena Sims, Lynn's mother, followed through on this possibility. So he drops it in and then deflects it away.
Right. Talk to her about it, because I couldn't bother myself with it. And then it's a category called history.
Which is fascinating. This part, I think, is the most interesting to me.
Yeah. Lynn and I had been having marital problems for approximately 2 years, mainly over her bank card spending and financial matters in general. All right. Where's the evidence? What corroborates this? Nothing. Again, it's putting the blame on her for their marital problems. This man, who we all know, has been having sex with a 16-year-old student of his, sexually victimizing her, bringing her into the home under the ruse that she's a babysitter, and having sex with her in their home, in his car, in the school. All of this is known information at this point. He's blaming marital problems on her spending money with the bank card.
Unbelievable.
Classic flipping the script.
Absolutely.
Classic, don't look over here, look over there. It's all on Lynn, nothing to do with me. And this actual part is in direct conflict with Helena's statement as well, who talks about Joanne Curtis being in the house and how tense and upset Lynn is. So again, if somebody had done their homework of comparing and contrasting, but we'll come on to that. So
Right.
Lynn's behavior, the bank card spending, and financial matters in general is what we're hearing about.
Right. And again, this is something that, as you just said, Laura, is a way to make investigators, because remember, this is targeted to investigators, look outside the home. Look at other factors. She's out there spending money. That created these problems. And then it's meant to set up the next sentence, which is an excuse for him to be out of the home for Christmas. And he said, I left the home for 3 days over Christmas and traveled north. Most important line in here, to be by myself. We all know that's a lie. We know that's a blatant lie.
Blatant lie.
That he went with Joanne. He did it because he was running away with Joanne. And it was her that forced him to bring her back. And his next line, and I returned home on Boxing Day, having missed my wife. Again, absolutely, just the way he said it, having missed my wife, not because I missed my wife, because I wanted to see Lynn and my daughters, my two little girls, 2 and 4-year-old girls. None of that. Having missed my wife. Again, it puts it in the passive tense. It's not active. It's not him in the moment. And so we all know that's a lie, because Joanne is the one that forced him to take her back. Joanne is the one that said, look, I can't do this. This is not something that I'm ready to do. She's 17 years old at this point. I mean, she's not even finished high school. She wants to live her life. She doesn't want to get tied down into a family where she has to care for 2 children that aren't her own. She wants to have this romantic thing with this guy that she looks up to, her teacher, who's actually sexually victimizing her. We can't blame her for being victimized. We can't put the blame on her. She's not the one who's in control of this. He's the one committing the crime.
The section of the trip on Christmas, it's so easily refutable. And the hubris of this guy who doesn't think that he could be contradicted about this. And these are physical facts that can.
He knows that the cops aren't going to look. He knows, because he has his friend telling him, hey, just write this out. We'll put this in the file, and that'll take care of it.
But can this be counted as perjury? I mean, is this document can be something that, I mean, obviously is being held against him now, but I mean, is he worried that this has to be a sworn statement, or is it not a sworn statement?
It's not a sworn statement until years later, when the detective actually interviews him, and he gives, he basically sticks to the story pretty well. He gives a little more detail in certain areas, but then it becomes a sworn statement. And the detectives very well were locking him into that statement. This obviously is his words. He wrote it in his own hand. He voluntarily made this statement, so it's still admissible, but it's not a sworn statement. Once he's lying to the police, if they have anything like we have here, which is a 1001 violation, lying to the FBI, for example, and there's plenty of different statutes that say you can't lie to a cop in the middle of an investigation. But once he does that in an investigative setting, then he's committing another crime. But this literally is just obfuscation. It's throwing red herrings out all over the place. Any attempt he can to put the blame on someone else other than him. Okay. So if we then move on, he says, I miss my wife and daughters. And here's another thing, and hoping to resolve our differences. Okay, and hoping. All right, so the sentence reads, I returned home on Boxing Day, having missed my wife and daughters, and hoping to resolve our differences. Having missed and hoping, okay, there's an incongruence there, all right? Having missed is in the past, and hoping is in the future. Why did he say it? And I hoped. He again drops the I, the personal pronoun, the one that actually tells us he's connected to what he's saying here. It's gone. Then he says, we both went to a marriage guidance counselor, psychiatrist, on Friday, the 8th of January. Everything seemed fine. When I dropped her back at work, we were both in particularly good spirits. Okay, he's characterizing it as very hopeful, all right? And we know from reports that Lynn was characterizing it as very hopeful. And then he says, we were holding hands and once again felt close, all right? Holding hands. Holding hands. This is your wife. Were you kissing her? Did you have sex with her? Was this, holding hands? It's like a public display of affection, but is it real? Is it deep? They're supposed to be married. Later that night, she appeared distressed and had difficulty coping with our youngest daughter. What's that again, Laura? Let's blame it on the little kid.
Under the bus.
Nothing to see here, nothing to do with me. It's all these other things that are happening. I mean, it's classic. That paragraph for me is really just classic deviation, distraction. They're trying to create, yes, there was some hope and we were trying to get things back on track, but still no real distress or concern, that she's missing. No,
right.
And it's been all this time and it's now August and where's my wife? I'm just desperate, and the children growing up without her, and I just don't know what to say to them. Just anything that's emotional that really has any depth is absent.
Right. It's all description. And her mother, Lynn's mother, said that Lynn was hopeful, that she felt like the counseling worked. And so she wasn't distressed. And then she said Chris made her a lovely drink. And she already sounded like she was half drunk now. And so it sounds like it got worse. And if the reports that we have are true, that he made her drinks whenever Joanne was coming over so he could have sex with Joanne while Lynn slept, then this was probably another indication that he was drugging her. And it wasn't just the alcohol, but there was something else in those drinks. So then he comes to the fateful day, and he says, Saturday, January 9th, she seemed happy. Again, he dropped her name and used a pronoun, and had decided to go to the markets and meet me and the girls back at Northbridge Baths after 12 o'clock. He's saying she was distressed the night before, but to cover why he would drop her off, a distressed woman, he says, oh, she seemed happy in the morning. Everything was wonderful in the morning. But it was she, again, not Lynn. So he uses Lynn when he's describing something that, that he may very well have done, but he leaves her name out when he doesn't. And then he says, I dropped her off at Mona Vale. Everything seemed fine. Mona Vale is a bus stop. And he says he dropped her. And then he says, Lynn rang the baths about 3 p.m. She said she was with friends. What friends? Who? What? Who are these friends?
Give them their names.
Name them, right. Not to worry. It was her turn. And that she'd ring later that week. Well, wait a minute. She just says, I'm with friends. Don't worry. I'll talk to you later in the week. Wait a minute. What are you talking about?
For a woman who never leaves home, never goes off on her own, would never leave just of her own accord like this.
She doesn't have a bag. She doesn't have clothing. She doesn't have money.
Who's going to take care of the children? Where wouldn't that be her first thought? Make sure the children go with my mom or anything about their welfare or care.
Or him saying, well, what do you mean? And even put it in the statement, your mother's here, Chris is here, we're all waiting for you. No shock, surprise, or horror of this event happening in this statement.
Right. And then he, implies here that she's suggesting she wanted a time away from family like he had. So she wanted her 3 days away. But now he says, well, she rang what, a week later, the next Saturday or something, and said she needed more time and wouldn't return home until she felt happy to do so. She didn't ask about the girls. She didn't concern herself with who's taking care of them.
No way.
She didn't concern herself with the fact that her husband had been, having sex with this 16 and 17-year-old girl, moved her into the house. She didn't ask any questions about that. He already, at this very time, had Joanne sleeping in his bed with him on her side of the bed. I mean, let me just say how possessive this guy is. When he goes away up north for 3 days, well, he intended it to be forever, he took his pillow with him. All right? He took his pillow. All right? But then, 2 days after Lynn reportedly is missing, he gives Joanne Lynn's pillow. He gives Joanne Lynn's clothing. He gives Joanne Lynn's part in his marriage. And that's just outrageous. And
I think that's a very good contrast there, Jim, actually, of the pillow in particular, because it tells us about the man, just in that sentence there, and the contrast with Lynn, that he packs everything up. He is committed to leaving to the point that the pillow matters to him and he wants his comfort. But yet, on the other hand, he's saying that his wife just literally walked out the door, said, I'll give you a call in a week, took nothing with her.
Nothing.
Not a picture, nothing. Yeah.
So he also tells Joanne, Lynn is not coming back, ever. He tells her that. Supposedly he doesn't know shit about where she is or what she's doing. And he tells Joanne, Lynn is never coming back. To me, the definitive nature of that statement is very incriminating, incredibly incriminating. And it shows, again, his behavior speaks much louder than his words. His wife is gone, and he brings in his girlfriend, who's actually his sexual victimization victim. He brings her into the marital bed in their home and puts Joanne in the position of mother to his children. And, of course, Lynn is nowhere to be found. And I only think that could possibly happen if she was dead.
Well, and Lynn was also having pictures of the children done by a photographer and a well-known artist. And she called up, Chris Dawson picked up the phone, and he said that the pictures weren't wanted anymore because Lynn was never coming back. And so, again, that conversation is now critical evidence. And the fact that Lynn's mother, Helena, and others always said that she remembered everyone's birthdays, always was the first to pick up the phone on birthdays or anniversaries, or, and it was Lynn's mother's birthday, significant birthday coming up, I think in February, and Lynn was organising the party and everything that went with that. So what we know about Lynn and just the detail, her attention to detail and people and her kindness and her caring side and her compassion, why would she just walk out and just abandon the people that she clearly doted on and adored and loved? Just doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't. Where can you find the perfect Valentine's Day gift for a man? Man Crates. Man Crates knows what guys like, and they have hundreds of gift options, so you'll find the perfect surprise for them. These gifts are totally unique, and the best part is they come in a sealed wooden crate with a crowbar, and you get to bust it open, and that's half the fun. Unique gifts like personalized barware crate with personalized pint glasses and bottle opener, and the pizza grilling crate with pizza stones and two-sided dough roller. He'll use it all the time. My favorite was the wine connoisseur crate that I got. And I'm also learning how to make a leather messenger bag myself. It's really cool. Or you can try Man Crate's take on Valentine's with a jerky heart, a heart-shaped box full of beef jerky, or the salami bouquet. That name says it all. Give an unforgettable Valentine's Day gift this year. Plus, every Man Crates comes with 100% satisfaction guarantee. Get them a Man Crate plus one of their meaty Valentine's gifts and save. Just for Valentine's Day, get 14% off when you spend $100 or more at mancrates.com/realcrime. That's 14% off when you spend $100 or more at mancrates.com/realcrime. mancrates.com/realcrime.
And she said to me, and this is only about 2 weeks before she disappeared, Everyone sees Chris one way, but there's a dark side to him that nobody knows. And I wonder now if we ever really knew him at all.
So let's move on. It just gets better from here. So prior to Christmas, Lynn had opened her own bank account and bank card. Statements for January and February show that she made these purchases. Well, does it? Does it actually show that? Or does it show that someone made purchases?
Yeah, I think that's again very important point, and Hedley and I talked to that last night. You know the old system of swiping. It's not like today, like chip and pin or electronic. You would swipe, and it would take some time to register. And of course, this is pre-Christmas, and so it's highly likely that those transactions were probably made pre-Christmas anyway, and it was just after the Christmas break when people went back to work that they then registered on the statement. And if she were, with friends on the coast, why would she drive? She doesn't drive for one, but why would she come back to purchase a couple of random items and then nothing else?
And I think that's the thing that shows his lack of criminal sophistication, Lisa. The fact is, had he made a purchase up on the coast with her card, had he been smart enough to do that, that would corroborate what he's claiming. But instead, she would come back and make a purchase near her own home where anybody could have recognized her if she was actually trying to hide perpetually, which her behavior supposedly, in Chris's mind, proves that she was trying to hide from everybody. That's why she avoided everybody. But in fact, what he did was made it look like she came back to her hometown, and actually that undermines every single thing he has said.
And why not go to the store then where she's made these transactions and ask, why didn't the police?
Seen her? Yeah.
Have you seen her? And also, is this true? Do these statements exist, these physical statements?
I don't know.
Hedley's view, they're bogus. No statements have ever been produced. So, and I have to agree with that, in the sense that why would she, if she's in hiding, run the risk of coming back to buy a couple of items she could have purchased anywhere? And if she doesn't want to be seen or found, it flies in the face of that.
And what were the items?
Transactions thereafter, but statements were never produced. And that's the issue with his account. Every sighting, everything that's said about her still being alive is all through Chris Dawson. It's not by anybody else, and it's his account and narrative, that needs to be challenged. And of course, this is written by his own hand, his account, his narrative.
Right, and then we go on to, he says, Lynn was reportedly seen at, it looks like Nanawina or something like that, reported to her mother. Well, by whom was she reportedly seen, and when, and what was she doing when she was seen? It says reported to her mother. And then also at Gosford by Mrs. Sue Butlin.
Butlin, I think.
Yeah. So again, he gives the name about Goslin, but he doesn't give the name about Lynn was reportedly seen at Narrowena, reported to her mother, but by whom and when, and what were the circumstances? What was she doing? And did anybody ask her what was going on? No, none of that detail. Why are there no details? Because when you're lying, it's easier to say simple declarative statements and not go into details. It's easier to remember those things. And then it says the last contact I had with her was by phone on the 16th of January, 1982. The 16th of January, 1 week exactly after she was reported missing, right? Well, she wasn't officially
not reported.
Well, 1 week after she was actually last known to be alive. And there's no corroboration for this, but in other statements, he'll say he heard from her weeks later. And that inconsistency undermines the credibility of these statements, and there's absolutely no corroboration. And then at the end, and then he says, Sergeant Brian Gardner, manly detective. Manly detectives, why does he say that? It's just kind of weird. I guess he's part of the Manly Police Department, and he's a detective there, has been advising me on procedure. Now, why would he do that?
What?
Now, one, if this was Chris's idea, it may have been because he wanted to drop a name to give credibility to his statement. And the fact that it is labeled antecedent report may mean that it was actually the result of consulting with somebody like this detective. Or this detective may have been giving him advice and said, put my name down on the end, and that will give your statement credibility, and they will believe it, and this will be the end of it for you. And this will close the door on people's suspicions about you and about what happened to Lynn. This will make sure that nobody comes knocking. And in fact, either of those intentions, whatever they were, whichever one was actually correct, or if they were both correct, the fact is it worked. Because not only did nobody come knocking, but in fact this letter disappeared, as well as all the case file materials. It all disappeared. And had it not been for one of Lynn's good friends, who actually stepped up and reached out to the ombudsman, who was then mandated to investigate, who then asked for documents from the police file, which then existed, and then saved those documents. The police department actually destroyed them or got rid of them or lost, or somebody stole them, or somebody deliberately got rid of them. But the ombudsman saved them, at least some of the files. And that actually gave us something to go on and gave us a record of what actually happened at the time. And when Hedges started diving into this investigation, it was very fortunate that they had kept this letter that shows, that documents in Chris's own handwriting, lies that can be proven to be lies, that show a significant indication of guilt on his part and of obfuscation and misleading an investigation. And therefore, I think it shows a consciousness of guilt on the part of Chris Dawson.
And the statement, and obviously it's 2 pages long. I think that this is a very valuable document, and it's the omission of things that are even more striking, as we said, but also the new witnesses that have come forward. With the circumstantial evidence, it does build a very significant case file. And if you put the backdrop of the coercive control law in there too, and I have spoken with legislators in Australia who are keen to understand more about the coercive control law, and I would be so happy to speak to New South Wales Police in particular about coercive control. I think that this is a very compelling case. And I have to say, we have prosecuted and convicted others in cases with far less evidence than this. And so,
absolutely. Me too.
Why? You too? Yeah.
Yes.
How and why case files go missing? Well, for me, they don't just go missing. And that is a very serious, concerning matter that I hope Nick Fuller is looking into, because I don't think it's just acceptable to say, well, that's some time ago and, there's nothing we can do about it. In the Metropolitan Police Service at New Scotland Yard, we always had a rule that you clear the ground from under your feet in an investigation, and they did not even start the investigation because they never took this seriously, and repeatedly over years it wasn't taken seriously, and questions have to be asked about that. What is the attitude that when a woman, a 33-year-old beautiful woman, goes missing in the prime of her life, a young mother, that no one asks questions? And that's why I find this so irksome, and why it stays with me on a cellular matter. This could be anybody. You just disappear and no one asks questions about you.
Right. It's just terrible. I think, it just goes to the level of control that Chris had around his life and circumstances. I do not believe, though, that he would have been able to pull this off without the help of his brother. I think he needed his brother's assistance. I think he needed his brother's guidance.
I would add brothers, Jim, because did you say brothers?
Well, yeah, but I don't know that his brother Peter would have been involved in the actual murder or disposing of the body, but I do believe Paul could have been. And I think that's because they were so close. I don't think he could have pulled it off without him. And I think Peter probably came in later. I think Peter came in to help. Well, he gave advice.
He helped bury evidence in other ways.
Yes. That's certainly a possibility. I don't know what Paul did with respect to this, but again, just knowing how these two brothers operated, these twin brothers who were incredibly close and connected, who actually sexually victimized girls together,
Exactly, they both did. And we know that Paul was more prolific than Chris to start with. That's what people said.
Right. So I don't think he's squeaky clean in this. And again, I do not believe that Chris is smart enough and adept enough to have pulled this off alone. He needed help. He needed somebody to help him do this. And the logical person that would have done that was his closest other human being, and that was his brother, twin brother, Paul.
Oh my God, we have so much more to talk about, but we're going to have to wrap it up here.
Yes. So we will continue the discussion of The Teacher's Pet, an incredible investigative series created by Hedley Thomas and The Australian. And we are hoping that by getting the word out to our listeners and listeners around the globe, we'll find more people who are willing to come forward and give evidence in this case and unlock the secrets that have been hidden from this case and from the case of sexual victimization of children in schools in Australia, because Australia is no different than anywhere else. It happens here in the United States, it happens in England, it happens in Australia and New Zealand and everywhere. This happens, and it's not going to stop until people talk about it openly and investigate when there are allegations. And just to brush it off is unconscionable. Don't do it.
Believe victims when they come forward and take them seriously. I've just had enough of reading case after case of the murders of women and girls in particular who have reported things and they're not believed, they're routinely dismissed. And that's going on present day. We've got to get better at what we do. And this is a vital podcast that helps educate people about coercive control and sexual abuse and domestic violence. So if you are sat and you have knowledge or information, you can call Crime Stoppers in the UK if you know that abuse is ongoing or that somebody is being victimised. You can also, if you're in Australia and you know something about this case, either the historical sex offences, Operation Strike Force Southwood is currently the investigation into those historical sex offences, and Operation Strike Force Scriven into the disappearance of Lynn Dawson. So the number is 1-800-333-000. So please do not suffer in silence. And your silence, if you know something is happening, that colludes with the abusers and it allows them to get away with their behaviour. So please do not remain silent.
If you see something, say something. If you feel it in your gut that something is wrong, tell somebody.
Investigate, yes. And look at our site, look at our Facebook page, and we will post resources for people who are going through any kind of abuse or abusive situation. And thank you so much for listening, and we hope you're enjoying this new year and that a lot of good things happen in the weeks and months to come. Till next time, thank you for listening to Real Crime Profile.
And hashtag her name was Lynn Dawson.
If you like our podcasts, there are a few things you can do. You can take 2 minutes and go to Apple Podcasts and leave a 5-star review. You can also check out all Real Crime Profile offers and promotions and our sponsors in our show notes. Another thing you can do is go to Facebook and like our Facebook page, and you can also follow us on Twitter at Real Crime Profile without the E. And one last thing, please tell your friends, family and colleagues about us and spread the Real Crime Profile word. Thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate all of our listeners.
Real Crime Profile is produced and edited by Paul Francis Sullivan. Sound engineering by Mike Thal. Music is composed by Simba Tsumba. Logo art by Jim Clementi. Real Crime Profile is produced by XG Productions and distributed by Wondery.
For advice and support if you're experiencing stalking in the UK, you can contact Paladin National Stalking Advocacy Service on 0203 866 4107, or you can go to the website where there's a lot of information and advice that you can follow on www.paladinservice.co.uk. If you're experiencing domestic abuse, you can call the National Domestic Violence Helpline for free on 0800 2000 247. In the US, if you're experiencing domestic abuse and need advice, shelter or counselling, you can call Genesis, the 24-hour hotline, on 214-946-4357. You can also go to their website for further advice or support, www.genesisshelter.org. And there's the domestic violence hotline on 800 799 7233.